Welcome everybody to the discussion that we have today on reinventing trackers, brand trackers, other trackers with the YouGov Cube. What I'll do is we'll just go through a little bit of introduction and then we'll jump into the material itself. Okay, looking at the attendees and the people that have registered for the webinar in advance, welcome to everybody across industries, wherever you are. Thank you for spending the time with us and for listening to this particular webinar on a topic that has become pretty important right now as we consider brand budgets and budgets in general and getting value out of research and insights coming from that. We're joined by professionals across industries, which is good. We have a diverse audience for opinions and comments. Before we begin, a couple of things. Number one, the session is being recorded, and the presentation and the recording of the discussion will be available after we are complete. So for anybody that wants to have this for your organization, yes, we'll pass that to you. Secondly, if you do have any questions, we're going to save 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the presentation to answer any questions you may have. If you have questions, please put them in the chat box. Everybody will be able to see them, and we will chase those down in the minutes before we conclude the discussion. Really quick, so you know who is talking, we'll do a couple of speaker bios. We have a great cast of characters that will talk through some of the material. So let's take a moment to let each person introduce themselves. My name is Evan Williams. We'll leave our cameras off today just to make sure we keep bandwidth focused on the material and make sure there's no disconnects. I am from Minnesota originally, and now I reside in Vancouver, Canada. I have worked around the world. I've lived in Asia, Japan, Singapore specifically. For me, the key things I'd highlight for you is that I have spent most of my career on the client side. And so I like to imagine I have been in some of your shoes if you are sitting on a brand or in a marketing department. And I like to think that I can understand what you go through. And I'll generally speak through the voice of a client, less so just YouGov on these topics, things I've experienced and things that I've observed, and I'll share those experiences with you. Jake and Julian, why don't you guys take a quick moment to introduce yourselves as well?
Sure, thanks, Evan. So my name is Jake Polanczek, and I head up the custom research team at YouGov in the UK. I'm based in London. I have over 20 years of experience in research now on agency and client sides, and I've majored, over the course of my career, I've majored in financial services really, but also with the experience across a broad range of other sectors and certainly a broad range of research methodologies. Some of the key areas that I worked in are listed under my bio there, but yeah, across the full breadth of methodologies, really. Julian?
Hello, my name is Julian Took. I've been working for an embarrassingly long period of time, so I've been working for about 30 years now. I work mostly for media and creative agencies as well as for research agencies. I've oscillated between jobs where I've worked on the UK or globally. At the moment, and this has been something I've been specializing in for some years, I'm thinking about how you integrate different forms of data. So specifically in this context, how we integrate custom and syndicated data together. That's it from me.
Okay, great, fantastic. Yeah, so what you'll hear today in this discussion, you'll probably have a few different views. You'll have people that have worked in agencies, you'll have people that have worked in brands, you'll have people that have deep expertise in research as well. And so we hope to give you a little bit of a diverse set of viewpoints, albeit coming from the YouGov voice. Okay, let's go through. let's jump into it. So I think everybody on the call would have some knowledge of YouGov, but I don't assume anything. And so let me just do a very, very brief introduction to those of you that are less familiar with YouGov. YouGov is a data and analytics company. And what we're good at is collecting consumer opinion, behavioral data. We have a strong record for this. This is what we do every day. We engage millions and millions of people. What makes our company a little bit unique relative to our peers is that we believe in this concept of connected data. And you can see that here on the slide that we're displaying. But really what it's about is the ability to take all the different surveys that a person would answer and join them together to give a full picture of the person and also give insight into how the profile of that person relates to what they do and what they think. I won't spend too much time talking about YouGov, but I just wanted to make sure people on the call, if you were less familiar with us, understood what our company does. I also won't belabor this point, but I'll just highlight it before we jump into material. We engage a large group of consumers on our panel every day. And as part of that, as part of a professional market research agency, data quality is not only imperative, but it's our obsession. So I won't go into detail on every slide on how we ensure quality. There's a lot to unpack, and certainly we can talk about that in another webinar. But we are perceived to be by the industry as a company that outperforms our competitors on data accuracy. We care about ensuring our samples reflect the population. And because of the scale of our company, we've become pretty good at it. So I won't belabor the point of data quality, but I just wanted to highlight that this is something that we focus on and we ensure in all of the data that we collect. Obviously, it's also collected in an ethical way and is GDPR appropriate. So, and then for those of you that are, again, less familiar with us, we have a lot of different products. Sometimes people think YouGov is a syndicated data company. We are not. We have a full suite of products, actually. Some of them are syndicated. Some of them are 100% custom. Some of them in our product portfolio allow you to do the research. Some of those are templated. And then obviously the important part on any products that we really have is that all of them connect and are integrated into one database, which we call the Cube, which then is really the technology that we use to provide the insights. Those are then pushed through some of our industry best analytic and visualization tools. So we do a little bit of everything from syndicated to custom and all in between. Okay, enough about YouGov. Let's jump into the material. 3 goals that we have for the webinar today. Number 1, we want to talk about classical challenges with conventional brand tracking today. Now, brand tracking in the greater scheme of a market researcher or a brand's budget is a line item that is very large and oftentimes is one that is scrutinized by financial departments or procurement departments accordingly. The bigger the line item, the more people stare at it and the more people want to get a high ROI from it. And so we'll talk a little bit about the pitfalls of where brand tracking is today relative to what people expect from it. Secondly, we'll provide examples of how to build value from them, and then we'll show that to you, okay? Okay, so I'm gonna start with just a little bit of a conversation on the kind of challenges that I observed as a client and ones that I have heard from peers, people that I've worked with, and then clients, and then people like yourselves on the challenges that we have with brand tracking. So the first one, let me talk through is this common challenge that the data doesn't move that much. Okay, so this is something that we hear often. They talk to us about that, and within the communities of research, they say, well, it doesn't move that much over time. And then what I'll describe here is sort of some of the ways that suppliers have typically responded to that, and maybe some ways that we should, as research suppliers, and YouGov is one of those, how we should respond to that. So the first thing I would say on this one is, well, if the data doesn't move that much, classically what has happened from suppliers is they try to, or we try, well, we don't, but generally we'll try to dress up data, okay? So delivering fancier or better reports to make uninteresting data look better. I almost describe this as almost like lipstick on a pig, right? Like, it doesn't matter if the data doesn't move, and if it's uninteresting, it doesn't matter if you make it look good. That's not the point. Part of the reason for that is because brand tracking doesn't have the ability to go as deep and as broad as it needs to provide insight. So one of the ways to combat this idea of, well, it doesn't move over time, is to not think about it as a longitudinal only data point. Systems that give KPIs and sort of give you the ability to not just look at it over time, but also cross-sectionally across user groups, across different demographics, across current events and behaviors and attitudes towards current events like COVID, becomes a very important part of making sure that the use of brand tracking is not just to watch something move period to period, but also understand, while it's moving, why it's moving. Another common challenge that we see is that it's not regularly needed. And probably some of you experience this. You say, well, you know what, we have a variety of different market data. Maybe if you are on a brand, or maybe in an FMCG brand, I spent many years in FMCG, you have market data, or you have market share data, or you have media data if you are on the media side. And this is the data used pretty often, but brand tracking data is data, well, I don't really need it. Well, if you don't really need it that often, that's not so good. It means it probably is not delivering the kind of ROI on a daily basis that you should be expecting from one of your biggest spends in your budget. I call this the sort of the response to this, I call the it is what it is strategy. And that's one where people say, well, if you're not going to use it a whole lot, let's just make the whole thing super cheap, give a minimalist approach, and not really even try to add value on a quote unquote regular basis. But there's a way to overcome this. If it's not something that's regularly needed, obviously the goal should be to make it regularly needed. And one way to do that is by boosting the quantity of the information through survey integration. In other words, don't treat brand tracking as a separate budget. Treat it as the starting point for building an ecosystem of all of your research. So how do you do that? One way is you ensure that your brand tracker is incorporating and including trending events and topics that are coming up in the world as they come up, and you have the easy ability to then cross-tabulate what your brand tracker is saying with those current events. This has classically been hard for most companies in the space of custom research. And the reason this has been hard is because what happens when you add in current events or new information is you extend the length of your questionnaire, you make it long, you make it miserable for your respondents that have to answer that questionnaire, and you jeopardize the trendability of your questionnaire because you have changed it. If the instrument changes, the trending potentially can change. But there is a better way to do this, and that is through integration. Okay, so obviously we are one company that sells syndicated solutions, but part of the reason we believe in a hybrid of syndicated, templated, and custom is that it allows us to swap into the conversation everything that's going on in the world because of the data integration without jeopardizing the longitudinal trends. This has a lot of advantages. And as you can imagine, and as we will show you, connecting Adhocs from other research that you're doing into your brand tracker can help you sort of make more sense of your overall research agenda, reduce your cost, and hopefully reduce duplication within the research budget. As a client for many years, and one that worked in large organizations, it was very common to actually find that across the large organizations I worked in, that there was duplication of work and people were sort of doing the same study in different departments and they didn't even know about it. So there's an added value if everyone is on one system as well. Okay, so third, I don't know what to look at. This is probably one of the things I've heard most since joining YouGov from the client side, and certainly heard a lot when I was in that chair, which is we want to make sure that brand tracking correlates with meaningful KPIs that we are looking at in our company, whether that is revenue, sales, consumption, market share, etc. Well, a typical response to this is if you don't know what to look at, people will come to you and say, we will tell you what to look at. Oh, we will increase the analysis. Maybe a system that says, well, if you don't know what to look at, we'll just point you, in a very clear, logical path from point A to point B to point C and tell you the answer. Or probably a more classical example is using category or industry experts that come in and say, we know everything about your category. Now, I spent years working in technology at Uber. Most of you are in the UK, so you know that brand probably pretty well for what it has gone through. I lived through some of those dark times in the PR crisis for Uber. But I always was perplexed by the fact that a lot of companies would come to me and tell me they had industry experts with the assumption that they knew something about the particular category that I worked on that I spent every single day, all day thinking about. And that I didn't find that very common that someone really knew the category that I worked in. And that always bothered me a little bit, but nonetheless, you will find that a common response to I don't know what to look at is bring in experts and sell the solutions. And for those of you on brands, you've probably seen this happen. And maybe you have even experienced sort of this like, well, here they are, they're really smart, and then they disappear and you're stuck on your own trying to figure out the answer. YouGov believes that one of the ways to overcome this is to put tools and technology in the hands of the users that know their industry and know their category best, and allow those people to have the ability to find the truth themselves. Obviously, we have a complete custom unit and we will provide those insights as well. But over time, as people become more data literate, as marketers become more data savvy, we should think about as an industry moving from a model where suppliers tell us everything to us having the ability to look for the insights ourselves. It's very important because no one knows your business as well as you know your business. So this is kind of a different way of thinking about research, less reliant on suppliers, more reliant on data and technology that gives you tools in your hands to answer the questions yourself. So we're going to go through a lot of examples over the next 45 minutes. What we know is that where we are at as an industry is that we know brand tracking and tracking in general, whether that is your brand, whether that's NPS or anything else you're tracking, this is relevant, especially now with everything changing in the world as it is, with all the chaos in the world the way it is. I'm from the US, it's probably more chaotic than anywhere in the world. We need to understand where brands are, and we need to understand where we are as companies. But how we do that, we can certainly change. We can upgrade from where we have been over the past several decades. So we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about reinventing this small thing in the world called brand tracking or tracking. And we're going to talk about it through a few dimensions of value that we believe can be created with a new system of thinking through this. The key benefits that we want to highlight today are three. One is about being flexible. Trackers should have the ability to adapt to daily issues, new trends, hot topics easily. COVID, it should be able to adapt to COVID in an easy way without jeopardizing both the quality of your trends over time or increasing costs. We'll show how that works. Scalable. Having worked in global systems, having been in local markets, having been in global centers of big companies, I know that sometimes it feels like you have to choose between being hyper global or hyper local. And that should not be a decision, in terms of what people have to make. There's no dichotomy. This should be integrated so that everybody gets what they need and what they want. Consistent KPIs for the people in the middle, deep dive analysis for the people living in the local markets. And lastly, how it connects. So not just thinking about your category, not just thinking about one specific client in one category if you're on the agency side, and we know there's a lot of people joining us today from media agencies and so on, but thinking about the context of these brands beyond that category and into adjacencies and across the different touch points and across the different challenges that your consumers have when they are interacting with your brand. So by connecting these things together, it allows us to have a better and more informed understanding of all of the data points, not just one by one and not just in a splintered research agenda. So flexibility, I think I already described this. I won't go into too much depth on this, but really is about adapting. Okay, so I want to show you a very quick example of how a brand tracker adapts to the issue of the day, COVID-19, and how we at YouGov are looking at what's going on in the world related to this and related to brands and putting them together without making a painfully long 45-minute survey and pretending that we haven't hurt the integrity of a brand tracker. So for those of you that know Brand Index, it's a syndicated solution. Okay, well, it tracks a brand over time. I'm just going to show you an example here. A standard tracker will largely do the same thing as our tracker if that's all you care about, and that's this. So we have a brand, Netflix, and we have a metric, consideration to use Netflix. And we've looked at this among an audience of people that know what Netflix is. Well, that's probably a pretty high number. And so, well, let me just make sure that we are not asking people to consider something they're completely unaware of. A standard tracker will give you this view. Okay, so we're not the only company that will do this, certainly. And maybe if you have seen something like this that's very familiar. In this case, all we're doing here is saying, well, consideration has grown to use Netflix over the last several months, and intuitively, even if you are not on Netflix brand or work with Netflix, this would make sense to you. People are at home, people are avoiding going out, people are making sure that they are listening to social distancing information coming out from the government. Okay, so this isn't surprising to us that we would see, but the issue here is that sometimes if this is all you see, you anecdotally will say, well, the reason for this is COVID-19. Well, you know what, I'm not gonna pretend it's not, that's what it's from. But when you're able to take a simple metric like you see on the screen, and then you're able to put it with another piece of data on hot topics of today. So in this case, we had that same metric you just saw, the brand tracking metrics, and we joined it with a completely separate survey, but taken by the same audience, which was around COVID-19. Now, this is possible because if you have an online panel, they will take surveys over a number of different topics and over a number of different days, and they will give you information. So we took two things here in this example, brand tracking from Brand Index and COVID-19 survey. And we said, what happens when you're looking at consideration among people that have claimed in the COVID survey that they have heightened levels of fear of contracting COVID-19? Well, what you will see is there's kind of a difference. Now, both groups grow, but you can clearly see that people with heightened levels of COVID fear are more likely to consider Netflix than those that are not worried about it. And this is a UK example, so the lines are different but closer. If you were to look at this in other markets around the world, what you would see is these lines will change in terms of the gap between them. The belief systems that people have related to COVID, speaking from also a North American context, the greater the disparity in what people believe, the greater the disparity in what their attitudes are towards brands, and subsequently their behavior towards brands. So what we believe here is that being able to be flexible, and it's not just about COVID-19, it's about any topic that comes up in the world that's meaningful, has a high level of breadth across populations and hot topics that people have opinions on. We want to understand how our brand moves within that context. Okay, so that's what this is really about, is being flexible. And the reason this is possible is not by appending a survey to make it longer. It's by adding a completely different survey to the same people that allows us to do this. And it goes beyond just hot topics. If you understand that construct of different types of research for different topics and integrating that, the world is your oyster, really. The expansion of flexible data allows you to think about other topics. You no longer have to have a 10 to 15 minute section of any questionnaire dedicated to demographics or attitudes or culture or media or any of this stuff. It's a waste of time in a survey over and over and over to have to add all of these sections. Your surveys on a topic should be dedicated more to the content that you care most about. It should be focused on what matters in that moment, and then just append the rest of it. Just put the rest of the data that you've already collected in previous surveys and other surveys related to that user, put that into it and be able to cross that, but don't use all of your survey real estate to repeat things that you've already asked people. Okay, so that's what flexibility is all about. Part of the reason this is for companies that are engaged in online panels, part of this is enabled by the fact that they are always on. You have an app, or you're on the website, you get invited to surveys on a regular basis, and you have the ability to answer and to give your opinion at any point in time, any day, on certain topics. So this is more reflective of the speed that information is sent to us as consumers today, right? The pace of news and social media is fast. These concepts of just checking in with your consumers every 3 months when their lives are changing daily really doesn't make a lot of sense. And so we like to think that flexibility fundamentally requires a constant dialogue with consumers about topics that are meaningful for them on a daily basis. Okay. Let's talk for a moment about scalability. This is really about making sure whether you're in the middle, in a central role, or in a local role, or if you are managing a large portfolio, that systems you use for brand tracking are scalable and have the ability to acknowledge the diversity of the products and the geographies that you're trying to manage. Glocal is, I guess, a buzzword nowadays. It makes no sense, I suppose, in the English language, but nonetheless, a glocal model enables companies to not have to make choices and sacrifices. In other words, you get all of it. Your local teams are satisfied because they have the ability to look at things in context in their country or in their geography. And your global teams have the satisfaction of knowing that they can track KPIs in a consistent manner. So we'll look at this a little bit, and then I'm going to give it to Jake to talk through another aspect of what a connected tracker is. So here, this is pretty obvious, but I just talk about it for just a moment. The ability to have scalable platforms for brand tracking has a lot of benefits to it. What I observed when I was in a client role is that many times it takes a long period for management teams to get clarity on the metrics themselves and then make decisions in a quick manner related to that. Constantly looking at reports over many, many markets and over many, many brands with PowerPoint littered with different asterisk marks at the bottom saying we had a different category frame, a different time period, a different competitive set, a different survey frame, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It slows organizations down. Okay? Having consistent metrics helps to alleviate that, right? So you structure the sample frame, the questions, the timing, and you make it easy. You make it fast to say, what is my position across the globe? What is my position across a range of our products in our portfolio? And you do it in a way that makes it easy for your C-suite to quickly look at and understand. Now, when you do that, you should not say, I've gotten consistent and now I cannot go deeper. I've decided to keep things so structured that my local teams are not equipped and have to set up something separate. In fact, you should have both breadth and depth. When you have consistent metrics and when you have visualization software tools to use, your analysis speeds up. You modernize that, you make it fast. It's not about making it pretty, it's about making it comprehensible. It's about making it retainable in your mind and being able to recite key facts for your management team. Reducing overspends. The more you scale and the more people are bought into one system, not just brand tracking, but in general, the more you harmonize that, the more likely it will occur that you do not have the same studies being repeated in different departments at different times, answering the same question. So one of the goals that we have as we talk to our clients, we want to save them money. It's not just about growing revenue for our company, we want to save them money as well. And lastly, and one that I observed when I was working on the client side, was about strengthening the collaboration between local teams and global teams. This is not a this or that, it's both. And the more people have the ability to go deep into their market and look across markets and share all the time what they're doing, is something that improves trust and improves collaboration. Most of the data tools that we have in the world today, outside of research, allow us to click one button and share things in social media, click one button and convey and send information to our friends and colleagues. Why should brand tracking be any different? We should put away the idea of having 100-slide PowerPoints statically that only get passed and distributed to people through an email, and then requiring people to open that email and then digest 100 slides. There has to be a better way to do this in all aspects of our careers and all aspects of our life. Here is an example of our solution. It's just one of things in the world, I would argue, working for the company. It's a good one. But this is a cloud-based technology that we have. This is our YouGov brand index. Some of you have this tool. For those of you that do not, you can just kind of look at it. And I know it's a little bit of an eye chart, so forgive me for that. But the idea here is I just picked one. Tesla is not a client of ours, but it's a great brand. It's a great product. It's an amazing product, like Tesla vehicles. But this is one where we just said, well, we just want to know, how is Tesla looking around the world? Obviously, on the upper left-hand quadrant here, we're just looking at the impression of Tesla around the world: Australia, Spain, UK, France, US, Germany, etc. Then on the upper right-hand side, we deep dive into one particular market and how is it doing relative to competition. And then we look at things longitudinally. This is just one dashboard, okay, longitudinally on the bottom. Obviously, if you are sitting in one market, in this case, we've selected the US because Tesla is a large brand in the US. Obviously, you can go far beyond just looking at these key KPIs like impression to understand different audiences, different demographics, and different attitudes towards automobiles, to understand the position of Tesla relative to competitors in real time, all the time, at both a local level and also being able to aggregate easily to a global level. You need to have survey, analytic, and visualization tools. It's not good enough to have 100-page PowerPoints. I sort of hate that idea. You guys probably figured that out. I talk about that quite a bit, but it's nonsense to have information being sent to us and given to us in a way that takes too much time to digest and does not allow us to discover the truth. So having survey analytic and visualization tools accelerates the insight process, like I've kind of written here, and it eliminates long form slide decks and swaps in the ability to do things very, very quickly and get to the point. And as you, the most knowledgeable person on your brand or on your account, you have the ability to look specifically for the things that you're looking for, as opposed to having someone narrate the truth to you. This is the last, one of the last outcomes that you would see from this is, well, you know, for those of you that manage budgets, this might feel familiar. This is certainly the reality that I faced years ago, which was every year I created a research budget, and that budget had many different line items. Some of it was brand equity tracking, which was usually the biggest, and then a lot of tactical ad hoc stuff, and then that adds up to just a big budget at the end of the day. What if you could look at that and you could say, you know what, if I connect everything together, if I reduce the number of ad hocs because it's all in an integrated database already collected, media habits, category attitudes, everything, I can save money. And I save money because I don't duplicate and re-ask the same things that other people care about. Obviously, there is a role to play for completely custom information. This is a strategic advantage for companies. If they know to ask the right question, they ask it, and their competitors do not have that information. So there's also that ability to create completely custom solutions, completely custom questions. But at the end of the day, the more you consolidate and connect these things together, the higher the likelihood is that you will reduce your ad hocs and you reduce duplication over time. The last thing we'll talk about is connected. And for this one, I want to hand this one over to Jake, who is the head of our custom division, who is going to take you through several examples related to connected information between custom solutions and syndicated solutions. So Jake, let me hand this over to you, and I will slide control, and you talk through the next several examples.
Great, thank you, Evan. Okay, so Evan's just taken you through conceptually how connected data works and the principles that underlie it. And as Evan mentioned, I'm now going to take you through a few examples to help illustrate what connected tracking is and connected research in general, what it can be. These are real world examples just to help bring this to life a little bit. They're actual cases, projects where we've implemented connected research solutions and where clients have chosen to work with us because of our connected research data capabilities. Okay, next slide, please, Evan. All right, so the first is for a major UK-based media conglomerate who own many products and channels, and they cater to all audiences and interests. They needed a brand perception tracker which looks across all of their key properties and also those of their main competitors in each area. Now, as you can guess, this requires audience sampling and analysis, which is going to be too specific for a syndicated only approach, or indeed for a straightforward nationally representative sample. So a fully customized solution was needed to be developed from the ground up. A key factor in this client selection of YouGov in this case was that using our connected data, we were able to identify appropriate panelists to take part in the survey. So looking at specific groups by looking at their media consumption habits and their interests and their demographics. This is all information that we already have to hand in our database, our panel database. Which means then that we don't need to free find our sample, which in turn results in a much more efficient and robust and cost efficient approach to sample targeting. Also pivotal was the fact that through our connected data, we're able to supplement the data collected in a 15-minute survey to provide vastly more detail and insight than could be achieved by using a questionnaire alone. So we just cycle through to the next slide. So looking at how this works from our client's perspective in this case, we've got a brand survey running monthly, collecting trend data on a consistent set of metrics over time. This data is then transferred into profiles, which is where the client can slice and dice any of the survey data and look at it alongside or through the lens of any of the thousands of other metrics which exist in the profiles database. And by the way, to be clear, profiles is the mechanism through which you can access all the information that we hold in our panel database. You know, internally we work off the same system essentially. So in taking profiles, you see exactly what we see. The various product and channel teams on the client side all have access to profiles themselves, and of course to the survey data as well. So each of the independent units in our clients' organizations, whether that's sports or news or music or kids programming teams, they can get exactly the data they need for their own specific requirements, all sourced from one consistent data set, which is providing that all-important single version of the truth for the business as a whole, to avoid any kind of confusion across multiple trackers and multiple data sources. So next slide. So not only does the combined tracker and profiles data allow our client to look at the information within their own programming silos, but the interconnected nature of the data also means they can look across their entire portfolio and identifying different user cohorts and analyzing where the crossovers and the synergies are between those user cohorts. Crucially also, I mentioned that the client in this case needed a competitive view, and it's especially important in an increasingly competitive global media environment. But the solution also enables them to perform the same analysis that I've mentioned across their competitors. Evan, if you could just cycle through, because there's a build on these slides, right? So they can understand how they're performing in the context of the wider media landscape, which then offers guidance on how to entice more viewers and online traffic over to themselves, away from their competitors, which is obviously the objective of any company in a competitive environment. All right, so the next example, Evan, if you could cycle through. Okay, so this next example I want to show you is for an NPS tracker. It's for a telecoms network provider. They came to us with a brief for measuring key customer experience metrics, including NPS, amongst their own customers, but also amongst their customers of their competitors, so they could benchmark their performance to see how they were doing in the real world. Here again, thanks to the information we hold about our panelists and database, we were able to offer a solution where we could pre-identify these people based on brand usage and product usage. So we could go to them and sample them directly for the survey without needing to pre-find or use bought lists with the resulting benefits in terms of speed and cost. In this case, the client also had an existing customer segmentation which was embedded into their business, and so naturally was a key lens through which their own business decision making took place. So this also had to be integrated into the research in some way. So next slide, please. The solution overall was to build a customer experience tracker which runs monthly. It's able to gather 60,000 targeted responses across the whole year. The client also purchased profiles, and we tagged the profiles database with the client's segments using their golden questions from that segmentation. And the end result is that they've got a reliable, always-on tracker, which provides robust data to the key stakeholders within the organization, providing consistent and regular data which can be trusted. That's the main thing. It's the client can have absolute faith in the validity of the data because of the way that it's collected and the sample sizes. Plus, they're also able to generate the very detailed segment-led analysis via profiles, more detailed than they were ever able to generate previously through a conventionally derived segmentation. So profiles was a great help in this way, and and shows how it can be connected or bolted on to an existing tracking piece for added value. And also, the part of our panel which is pre-tagged with the client segments also then serves as a useful reservoir of respondents when they need to undertake other research amongst certain segments or market cohorts. Okay, next slide. All right, next up is an example of a broad market flow study. So in this case, looking at a large telco operating across multiple products. Here the client came to us with a requirement to develop a definitive market landscaping data source. So it had to be really comprehensive. The purpose was to illustrate how loyal their own customer base is across all of their products, and where their customers were switching in from and why, and where those who are likely to switch away from them, where they're going and why also. And so in doing that, in having that kind of broad, comprehensive perspective, the client then is able to identify the opportunities to gain customers from competitors, as well indeed as any threats posed by competitors to their own customer base, and so then build their product and servicing and marketing strategies to address these threats directly. Okay, next slide. So the cornerstone of the study was a very large sample of 160,000 over the course of a year, spread across 2 monthly waves, and this runs every year, and there's the appropriate quarantines on the sample. But because our panel is so big, then 160,000 per year is no problem. The surveys is very detailed, as I said. It includes questions on current and previous and potential future providers across multiple products, which in this case included broadband, mobile phone, and subscription TV services. Now, the richness provided by this quantitative data set, alongside a further data overlay from our connected data set, mechanics of which I described before. And then also through respondent recontact. So because these are all our panelists, we do have license to go back to them. We're able to provide an accurate view across the various markets in which the client operates with very small margins of error given the sample size, and detailing not only the what but also the why, crucially, because of the depth of that data, which means that the client's then able to confidently make data-led, truly data-led business decisions. Next slide, please, Ellen. So with the help of the very large sample, 160,000 per year, the research provides a steady flow of robust quantitative data across specific products and providers. The careful sampling means we can extrapolate the data to the wider population to formulate actual numbers of consumers who might have, say, product X with provider Y, for example, or intend to switch away from provider A to provider B. Because we've got such a well-profiled panel, it means that we can append additional descriptive information to the data set, which of course saves space in the questionnaire, which is already needed to cover a number of other areas in detail. Also, as I mentioned, because the respondents are sourced entirely from our panel, we're able to recontact them based on how they answer the main survey or based on other characteristics which we identify through our connected data. So this all provides the opportunity for further diagnostic exploration, for example, around the reasons for switching or their switching experience. So how their switch of brands actually went for them, and providing a comparison about which companies do it better, and also their spending patterns when they do switch. You know, all of these things that there obviously isn't time to go into in the main quantitative questionnaire. But still, being able to go back to these people provides a source of very valuable diagnostic information. Okay, so next slide. All right, yeah. So the final example I'd like to share with you before I hand over to Julian for the final part of the presentation is where we've developed a comprehensive partnership with a client, which has resulted in an integrated research ecosystem. which got YouGov's connected data at its heart. It draws on our ability to provide a stacked knowledge resource. And by this I mean it's where we're able to overlay layers of insight onto one another over time and building on a knowledge base. So in this case, it began with a bespoke segmentation. Then using that, we then conducted some new product development work with the target audiences identified through that segmentation, and then also tracking brand performance in the longer term. So next slide. Yeah, so in this particular use case, the impetus was a new product launch, and the client first wanted to understand the market for the new concept by creating a comprehensive market segmentation. So once we developed the segmentation for the client, we then tagged our profiles panel base with the segment markers. This process then provided a substantial pool of respondents who were then recruited to take part in the subsequent testing of the new product, which involved quantitative research and qualitative design sprints. The client also had an existing brand tracker, which they moved over to YouGov to benefit from the segment overlay we were able to provide, but also the contextual linkage we were able to provide via brand index, which they also signed up to, and which the mechanics of which Evan demonstrated earlier. All right, next slide. All right, so to comment briefly on the value YouGov was able to add at each stage of the program, and why the client ultimately selected YouGov to work with them as partners. First, the segmentation. By overlaying the YouGov profiles data onto the segments that we developed, we were able to provide extremely rich pen portraits, very, very detailed, vastly more descriptive information in those than it'd be possible to obtain from the UNA questionnaire alone. With the resulting benefits then for the client's product and marketing teams, as well as their media agency, who were of course also then able to buy media in a much more targeted and cost-effective way. As owners of our own high quality panel, we were able to tag a very large number of our panelists with the client segments, in this case over 130,000, which provided a substantial pool from which to recruit respondents for subsequent research projects. And the product development phase benefited from us being able to reach these tagged panelists, and then also recontact some of the panelists who took part in the initial NPD surveys with a qualitative follow-up, for which we utilized our own in-house qual team. Finally, with a joined-up approach to brand tracking, we're also then able to provide always-on brand monitoring through brand index. Brand index is very good at that. But also then in combination with a customized monthly brand perception and comms tracker, so fully customized to the client's requirements. And this data set was presented in a joined up way, with the customized brand and comms tracking providing regular diagnostics, and then the brand index tracker providing some very sensitive cross-market data for additional context. So I hope these examples show how connecting data provides solutions which are much richer, more adaptable, and cost-effective for our clients than the more traditional methods. So I'm now going to hand over to Julian Tuke for the final part of the presentation. Julian.
Thank you, Jake. Look, I'm going to go at a fair pace because I'm kind of conscious that time is running on. So we're in the final furlong, that's the good news, but I'll do this at a fair pace. So to really summarize what we've been talking about, we believe passionately that when you link together custom data, which has real vertical depth, is really focused on a specific topic, with syndicated data, which has amazing breadth, you get the best of both worlds. Because what can happen when you're just doing custom surveys is you have a hunch or a view on what's driving your brand, what's important, and you research it, you measure it. But that becomes the self-fulfilling prophecy in itself, because you're only measuring what you think drives your brand. By linking it to broader data, we can look at the importance of metrics that you might not have thought of measuring, and link those to those things that you did think of measuring. We also think it's really important to have the full perspective on your competitors as well. And again, what often happens within organizations is people know everything there is to know about their own brands, but unsurprisingly, they know much less about competitor brands. So the more we can bring to the table on that front, the more the better, really. That might be particularly useful, say, if you were thinking about doing an NPS study, where again, there are conventions about what you should be, how you should be doing in terms of your NPS scores, but there's a lack of data there about how NPS scores actually vary by brand via category. So what does good look like in my category? We can provide that kind of context. So next chart. We have three offerings. First of all, we have our syndicated trackers. So you're all aware of brand index. Brand index is in the DNA of YouGov. I think it says, and I've only been at YouGov for about a year now, so I have been lured to YouGov from the outside because I was really impressed by it. I think brand index says that YouGov is really good at trackers. Big samples, data coming out every day. That's hard and complex to do. YouGov is handling hard, complex trackers. We also are developing a series of templated approaches to trackers. So what we're doing there is we're piggybacking on the back of brand index fieldwork, and we're effectively tracking the brand index tracker. And we're asking brand index respondents more questions within 24 hours of completion of brand index. Now, benefits of that, highly efficient way of sampling. That obviously means it's cost effective. It's also, as Evan touched on earlier, it also means that we get data which is really descriptive of what's going on with brand index. So normally when people are interpreting the brand index, they're saying there is a movement in the data. This happened in the real world at the same time. Therefore, that must explain the movement in the data. If we can link questions which go into more depth to that brand index data, we can posit stronger causative links, if you like, with those movements in brand index. So for instance, brand index allows you to look at brand attributes and consumer journey attributes, the path to purchase from awareness to actually purchasing it. We've developed a templated questionnaire which looks at the consumer journey and gives much more information about what brand attributes are important at different stages of that consumer journey. Sometimes it's all about the brand and emotions, sometimes it's all about knowledge and detail, for instance. So we can look at that, and we can also look at channels, how they engage at different stages of that consumer journey. So those are templated approaches. They are standard questionnaires done as recontacts of specific brands. They're services that you would request that we do for you with those standard templated questionnaires. They sit somewhere between syndicated and fully custom solutions. Fully custom solutions, we start with a blank sheet of paper, we do a fully custom sample for you, and everything starts with that blank sheet of paper, which is filled in by you. Next chart, please, Evan. Brilliant. So an example of a templated solution is we recontact current customers and we ask them about NPS. What we do in that templated questionnaire is we also ask them about the key drivers of high NPS scores. And we've done a lot of research to see what drives NPS. So things like brand trust. Can the brand be trusted to deliver on functional benefits? Can it be trusted to behave responsibly? Brand conviction, momentum, that feeling of being on the way up or not, sensing, presence, brand fame, if you like. And because we're doing it as a recontact, you can link that to all the brand index metrics, which are sitting in parallel, and the NPS data and the recommendation data, which sits on brand index. So that would be an example of a templated approach. Next chart, please. So we believe in joining the dots. It's all about the connections. Now, when we're joining the dots, what that effectively means is that we're creating this massively complicated, dynamic database called the Cube, YouGov's the Cube. Into that, we've got various streams coming in there. So that syndicated data is coming in every single day and updating. So it's really sensitive to what's changing. Our templated services, I talked about that all goes into the Cube. And then we have our real-time and our custom services. Obviously, that data is proprietary to our individual clients, so it doesn't get shared via the Cube, but we can link it to the Cube. Evan was saying the importance of having the right analytics tools, because, you know, you've got to have this data, there's loads of it. How on earth do you sift through it, and how do you make sense of it? Well, dashboards, we can develop dashboards with you. So you may have specific kind of standard analyses that you like to do. You may have a specific internal narrative, a story about your data, and you want the way the data is represented to displayed to represent that. Dashboards help you with that. Crunch, that's our analytics tool, that really helps you with the kind of deeper dives, the cross tabulation. Then finally, we have a kind of principle of open data architecture, systems architecture, so we can link data to other systems via APIs or data exports. Next chart, please, Evan. So almost there, you've had the quick introduction. I'm just going to quickly summarize. And these are the points that we would really like to land. Brand tracking must be modern. Brand tracking, it's in its very nature that you keep repeating the same questions. But the danger of repeating the same questions is you can get out of date. It could quickly seem old-fashioned. And the worst case scenario is that something awful happens, like the COVID crisis, and suddenly what you were tracking doesn't feel relevant. It doesn't feel specifically enough related to the COVID crisis. So if you can link that to profiles, which is changing all the time and having more questions added to it, and brand index, you can keep modern. And you can really understand those movements in the tracking data by bringing in this multitude of other data to get the full picture. Next chart, please. The consequences of not modernizing are severe. What you want is a stable tracker where you can track things over time, but you need to keep relevant. And we would argue that being integrated in the way you work, taking the full picture, means that you stay relevant. So final chart, I think this is. So connected data, what that means is, another way of saying it is joined up data. We think that gives joined up thinking. We think that gives joined up insights. And with all of that, you can have joined up strategies. And no data is caught in a silo, be it a data silo or organization silo. So you can bring it all together. And that's what we're all about. So look, thank you. That's it. I think we're 5 minutes late, but we would love to take any questions from you if you have any. God, I know it's odd with a big group like this, especially because we can't see each other, but someone be brave. We'd love to take a question, or you can send questions afterwards to us if you'd prefer.
I think given the time and that we've come to the hour, what I would ask for people to do is follow up with the questions. Obviously, you can reach us at the email address here or through your YouGov account team or any of us on this. We'll share the presentation and the recording right after this, so you guys will have you'll have that available. There was just one question that I saw come through at the very last minute that I'll just answer very quickly. What is the minimal sample N for connected data? Usually budget restricts to about 1,000, and that came from Wendy. That's fine. 1,000 is fine. You know, like the trade-off between precision and cost. Yeah, obviously, the higher the level of sample size, the higher level of precision. But generally speaking, having even as low of a sample size as 100 per cohort cohort doesn't violate any rules of statistical normality. A lot of people just think like, well, you know, you achieve something great with having a great sample size. That's not true. But you can have, you know, as long as you don't violate those rules of statistical normality, and then as long as you are comfortable with a little bit of an error variance plus or minus a few percent, you would be fine. So we can Wendy, to Wendy, who was bold and asked a question in the group chat. Thank you, and we can answer that question more specifically offline. And for the rest of you that took a few extra minutes to join us today out of your day, thank you for joining us, and thanks for giving us your ears today. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to follow up with you and give you more information on both this webinar, the content, and any questions you have.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye.